Hello, and welcome to take 3, where right now is 1:10 in the evening. Yes, indeed it is. Because as usual, when you have a bit of a headache, when you're not totally 100% in the game, there are some things that kind of slips your way. What I mean with that is that I've been recording without actually pressing recording. So I've been thinking I've been recording, and then I've been recording without any audio because I turned that off when I turned the camera on. It's just been splendid. It's just been bloody marvelous. But if you see this, it probably means that I kind of got it on the 3rd try. Yay! 10 out of 10, am I right, people? Am I right? And as I said, quickly mention, I have a bit of a headache. Now, there is a theory going around in my family that we're getting headaches based upon the weather. It's probably not just my family. I've read about it online as well. And there are other people claiming that this could be the case. That based on how the weather is actually shifting, you can get a bit of a migraine. Now, that could very possibly, rather that could maybe be the case, right, for my headache. Could also be because I'm working very long hours, that I've used an extensive use of a virtual reality headset. I mean, we're talking hours in the hours in the very short amount of time that I've actually had it. It could be because I'm staring into a very bright light down here. It could be because of irregular eating patterns and irregular sleeping patterns. It could be because I'm not drinking enough water. It could be a plethora of things. But one thing is true nonetheless, and that is that today I unfortunately have a bit of a migraine. Now, some of you clever folks out there might be saying, well, then, Philip, then why are you recording in the middle of the bloody night, or really early in the morning, depending on how you want to say it, how you want to see it? Well, that's because stress can also be a factor. I might just add that in. Because I have lots of self-imposed things and goals and projects that I picked up on myself that I want to work with. One of them is, for instance, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've released a couple of covers over the last few days, and I'm really happy with them, actually. Some of them I'm happier with than others, but overall I'm pretty satisfied with the outcome. So that is one of the many projects that I have in the works at the moment, which means that I kind of need to record these daily videos whenever I get the time to, because I cannot simply just push them off, which has been one of the topics that I've been talking about over the last couple of days. It's actually digging deep into things, not taking a break, actually utilizing the time that you do have and trying to fight for an objective. But something else that I've been talking about as well is an unbalanced world, depending on how you want to say it. The entire idea behind this premise is that there are some people in the world who are over-consuming, they're obese, whilst there are others who can't really do that because they're starving. They don't have enough resources. They can't really consume in their natural, their natural behavior as much as they naturally would like to do in order to sustain themselves and sustain their lifestyle. And to spin off on that, because as I said, I already talked about that. To spin off on that, we're going to talk about today's topic. Finally, am I right? And that is going to be individual economy. It was a term that I just came across when I was kind of networking a bit, looking for different jobs and so on and so forth, and I was reading a bit, right, online. I was reading a bit on the internet, and I saw this idea of individual economics, for short, Iconomics. I thought it was really funny, Iconomics. Probably gonna leave it in the title or somewhere in the video description so that you can look for it yourself. If I don't, then I'm sorry for my headache. But this is kind of a very interesting, I'm saying kind of a very interesting, I'm not saying I'm hedging here, but I'm kind of hedging here. I'm really hedging here. But it was a really interesting topic, actually. This idea of an individualistic economic view, an economic perspective that is catered around yourself and no one else. And this is based on the logistics nightmare on people, especially in the westernized world or a middle class or above, saying that, well, I want things when I want them, at the place that I want them to be, and I want a thing. So I want something, I want it where I'm at, and I want it when I want it, right? All of these things you need to cater around for each individual consumer as a company. So when you're as a company, you're looking to the collective and you're thinking, how are we going to sustain this collective with logistics and with distribution? Well, Turns out there is no easy answer, and the reason for that is because each and every one of these individuals deem themselves to be the only individual in the entire economy, which means that they want the entire system to be catered around them and no one else. And this, of course, spawns the idea of Iconomy, which is basically I as a consumer is looking towards myself as the center and the economy swirling around me and me as the center point, which means that everything that happens in the economy, put in the political landscape, or everything else in the world, really, any imbalance, is just a matter of proximity of how far away that is from my current position. Yet again, the entire idea with perceived cultural distance and physical distance, one can argue that if something is happening in the world that's really bad, but it's really far away from me, I'm not really that concerned because it's far away from my economic center, and I deem myself to be my own economic center. That's obviously a really bad view to have for anyone, or especially, I would argue, it's bad for the collective, it's bad for society that different consumers have such an individualistic perspective on how their needs should be met. However, even though this might be bad for the collective and bad for the overall populace, for the people who are in the sphere, so to say, the people who are affected by it, the people who actually deem themselves to be the center, it's really convenient. Because we've gotten to a stage where technology can cater around you as an individual so bloody much that you can get, as I said before, what you want, when you want it, where you wanted it. Which is ludicrous, really, if you think of it. I can go online and look for something, and I can just say, oh, I kind of want that. I can order it, and I can say I want it here by Wednesday, for instance. Just an example. Obviously, you can't say I want it here now. But within some form of a reasonable time frame, you can get this item that you want. And that is kind of ludicrous when you're considering that on the other side of the earth, in perspective to me, even though that's Australia, I know, but let's say that we're just flipping it, what should we say, 90 degrees, maybe a bit more, from Sweden and Europe down to Africa, in the middle of Africa. There are people who are living in extreme poverty, especially if you would argue that no, they're not living in extreme poverty because there's different perspectives of how economy is made, and there are different perspectives of how resources are utilized, and they're deemed to a certain lifestyle, and blah, blah, blah. Well, then we can at least argue that in relation to Europe, they're really poor. Not all of them, obviously, but a qualified majority, I would say, right? I'm not having any specific figures here or any specific numbers, so I'm sorry if I kind of step on your toes a bit here and if you're a bit sensitive about the subject, but that's my perception of the situation. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, this individual economy, even though I think that it's a really interesting term, it hurts, as I said, humanity as a whole. Because the more we cater around the specific need of a specific individual, well, on one hand, the more happy they can get. The more happy the consumer will be, the more we can make a profit of them, because we can have a higher markup, especially if it's a high barrier to entry market, and even dare I say, a monopoly or an oligopoly, well, I can't say that, or oligopoly. There is another way of saying the same thing, just that it's more companies than one who's kind of creating the market or in charge of the market. Anyway, I'm digressing. But the more we cater around the individual consumer and their needs, the more resources are considered and invested in one specific consumer. Now, we might not even be talking huge amounts of resources here, but it's still more resources that could have been redistributed to the people who are really in need of these resources. Now, this is something that is not the, not the most popular conversation to have out there. I know that. Nobody wants to stand in front of a YouTube video, stand in front of the TV, stand in front of a speaker, and be told that you're a piece of shit for doing what you deem to be natural and just for accessing what is, well, accessible to you. And I don't blame you, for God's sake. I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm part of the problem. but it's about being aware that we're a part of the problem so that we actually can fix it. Another way of looking at this individualistic, which was a nature of this term, is looking at it at a national level. For instance, I was recently in contact with the discussion that we are having kind of a high tax on petrol in Sweden, especially in comparison to the US and Russia. And someone was making the point that, or someone was trying to make in the case that why do we have such a high taxation on petrol when we're only 10 million people? It's only us in Sweden. We could survive without it. The climate change that we invoke isn't that great. And I don't know if I should say that it's the most scary that someone is making that statement, or if it is that people are actually supporting that statement under the assumption, obviously, that climate change is a thing, which I am of the mindset of it to be. But anyway, the entire discussion was kind of surveilling or kind of surrounding that, well, greenhouse gases and stuff like this is a thing. Right? So that was the underlying assumption of the conversation that we're having. The greenhouse effect and the warming of the planet is a thing. However, since we're only, quote unquote, only 10 million people in Sweden, roughly, approximately, why do we have to care so much when the bigger countries don't? Isn't this just the exact same thing as trying to cater to the need of the consumer? However, what Sweden as a nation is trying to do is saying that no, we're actually making a statement here. We're trying to be a leader position for other countries to follow. Now, we might not be the country with the biggest voice, with this biggest population to make an actual change on a global scale. However, the change that we can make is going to be significant enough in the long term, in the long run, influencing other countries to follow the same kind of path. And that's kind of the same thing as saying that instead of adapting to the individualistic perspective of Iconomy, we should instead be asking governments or companies to say that, well, we're not really going to cater to your need as much as we could, because that's not good for everyone. It's going to be better for you, obviously, but the resources that we're going to put into giving you a better experience are going to be taken away from the people who actually need these resources more badly than you do. Obviously, as I said, it's kind of a really boring thing to talk about, or I would argue it's widely interesting, but mildly effective, right? And that's because, well, we can discuss and talk about this all we bloody want. It ain't gonna make a change just because we talk about it. Action speaks louder than words. So obviously, go out there and try to redistribute the wealth in the world so that we're actually having an equal society and everybody's happy. But we still have some form of progress in technology and a drive in the markets so that we actually can sustain the lifestyle that we have, while simultaneously having a stable political structure that kind of supports this and a unanimous perspective of humanity that is trying to save us all and not trying to, kill certain parts of the population because they either look, sound, or behave differently. Now, I'm not saying that we're there. It would just be nice if we were, like that. If I could do that, I would. It would be amazing. Anyway, I'm digressing so far from the topic at hand that I actually wanted to discuss. It's crazy. It might be because of the headache that I can't really follow my own train of thought, that I'm kind of stopping and jumping off and going into the store next to the train station and then running back out to jump up on the train of thought again and go for a while. But what I'm trying to do, and I really haven't, what I wanted to discuss, right? These are all, devil's advocate, by the way. It's not really my opinions, all of them. Some of them are, not all of them. It's me trying to shift around the perspective on a project or on an idea and see where we can be going with this. But what I actually wanted to talk about today was the idea of individual economy and how that is called Iconomy. Yep, that's how this video actually started. That was my one and only thing I wanted to talk about, and it was my one and only note. However, as you can see, we've kind of digressed a bit. So what I want to end this with is saying that whilst this individual economy, Iconomy, sounds really interesting and probably is really good for the consumer that is targeted, it might have a negative effect on the entire population, since it's catering towards this problem of an unbalanced world, and it facilitates an unbalanced world instead of reverting the effect, like Sweden, for instance, I would argue, as a Swede, is kind of doing to their own population, even though, some of us in Sweden, or rather some people in Sweden, not saying it's me, but some people in Sweden don't want him to, because they don't want to consider the people from the other side of the world. They just want to consider the Swedes, let's say, which I believe is a ludicrous statement and a ludicrous mindset. But yeah, so is racism, and that's unfortunately still around. Anyway, mates, that was it for me. Wow, got really politically heavy there for a while, if you read into what I'm saying, which you probably shouldn't, because yet again, headache, and I'm just, fooling around a bit. Raw material, raw footage, no script, and all of that good stuff. Started with one term, and now I ended with a world-revolving strategy of how we can fix everything, which is never good 1 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. After you've been working all day. Anyway, mates, have a nice one, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.